I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're speaking with John Doc Fabiano. He is the acclaimed author of the Tao of Sales. He is bringing a fresh and unique perspective to the realm of sales, viewing it not as a battle, but as a simplistic, altruistic process. He is a veteran in sales, leveraging his personal experiences to provide readers with practical, ethical, and effective strategies that transcend traditional sales methodologies and emphasize mutual success. That's right. You got to think win-win. It's always a good idea. We're delighted to have Doc join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the folks at Authors Tranquility Press for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel. Doc,
Right.
thank you so much for being our guest today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
I loved your book. I think it
Thank
puts
you.
sales in a whole different perspective for a lot of people. It's moved far away from Death of a Salesman to to this is, a beneficial things. You're selling what people need, you're complementing their lives, you're empowering them by your sales. Tell us how you got the idea for the Tao of Sales.
Well, I tell you, I've always liked to keep things as simple as they possibly could be, and whatchamacallit, Occam's razor. In
Yeah.
any given situation, the simplest answer or solution is chances are it's going to be the right one. What I got this from was in 20 years, I went to every state in the union, and my responsibilities as a manager for my company's distribution people wasn't direct, but it had me go to every state in the union. I've been to every
Mhm.
major city. I did make some presentations to a lot of the Fortune 500. I was in capital sales.
Mhm.
Okay, so these were big ticket items. I mean, they weren't, little key systems that you'd find in your doctor's office. These were
Right.
industrial size systems and so forth. And my company originally, Rome, ROLM, were the first ones years ago to create a branch exchange that was run by a computer. So instead of calling it a PBX, they called it a CBX.
Mhm.
And in the beginning, we were the darlings of the communication industry because our system, because it was based on computer direction, did so many different things and kept on developing and developing and developing, and it was, I'll tell you, for someone whose background in education and so forth was mostly in the performing arts, having something to do with high technology like this was just really exciting and interesting. I'm intensely curious about things, and this just really kind of hooked me. But the travel throughout the country, I worked with sales organizations, as I said, in 50 different states. And I recognized that there had to be a lot of value to that. And it certainly, I brought that with me to the other distributors that I went with. The first thing you realize is when they put you into that situation where you're charged for guiding your distributors is that you really want them to sell your products.
Mhm.
Of course, what nobody bothers to tell you is that you need to make sure they know how to sell first before you get them to do that. So I spent a lot of time teaching people how to sell. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. I mean, there's the financial sell, there's this, there's that, and everything else. And I got to see, a lot of different types, a lot of different techniques, and so forth. And one thing that always holds true, we kind of make a joke out of it, is that you can learn a lot about sales from people that aren't doing very well. Okay,
Exactly.
look at them, don't do what they do.
Right.
Okay, you want to go out there and do that, but sales is something that I want to say is organic the way
Mhm.
I see it. And I've kind of simmered it down to the basically the thing of sales is listen, question, keep it simple, and make it yours.
Mhm.
And if you can latch on to that, then your chances of being successful are very good.
Yeah.
Because salespeople, if they can't listen, they might as well go sell good humor bars or something. I
Right.
mean, it's not going to do that. You have to be a good listener. You have to be a good questioner. And the other thing that I've learned over and over and over again, and you probably do the Zig Ziglar probably repeat the same thing too,
Mhm.
is that your prospect will eventually tell you how to close them, how to sell them. That's why you have to pay attention. That's why you have to listen. Some people say, well, you should question first and listen second. My feeling is no, you want to listen first, give them an opportunity to tell you what's going on in their lives. What do they want from sales? Okay, are they trying to reduce their expenses? Are they trying to increase the sales? Are they trying to increase their margins? So forth like that. So there's different ways of going about it. But talking about dealing with sales organizations in every state in the union, boy, you get to see a lot of different ways that people do it. The people that are successful are naturally born to being successful. They don't leave any stone unturned, you know, and they know their product better than anybody else. They know their competition backwards and forwards better than anybody else. But they also know their prospect, okay, better than anybody else. You know, with a few questions, they can determine what does this person need? What does that company need? You know, and how do you present that to them so it's attractive? It's something like they feel, yeah, this is worthwhile. This makes sense to me. And that's why I like it. The Tao, it's pronounced Tao, not Tao, but it's
Yeah.
pronounced Tao, is basically an Oriental philosophy of keeping things as simple as possible,
Yeah.
you know. And since there's so much going on in sales, making it more complicated is a net sum game. I mean, it's not going to help you at all.
Yeah.
So I got to doing this and thinking about it, and I started doing some research before I set myself to writing it down. And I did a lot of homework as to what's going on in the industry and sales and so forth about that. And when you look at the information at the beginning of the book, it's really kind of surprising because the research kind of tells you that generally, as a rule, most salespeople are not successful.
Right.
You know, and you've probably seen that too. They're not successful because they are not tuning into their prospect. You know, a lot of times they've decided on the wrong prospect. The basic currency that a salesperson has is just time. Okay. And if they don't know how to manage their time well, they're, they're not going to make it to the Hawaiian trip. You know, they're not going to do that well. And that's the thing that they need. That's why I say it's not a battle. It's not an athletic competition because, and I say in the beginning of it, it's not a win or lose situation. If you go into it looking at that way, then you're basically saying to yourself, you want your customer to be a loser.
Right.
I want to win.
Right.
And from where I come, that doesn't make any sense to me
Yeah.
at all. You want that person to feel good. We had something that we used to talk about when we got into the bigger systems, the bigger organizations where you have one or two individuals who only responsibility is the communication system. And you want to make sure that they understand what's going on. And they also want to understand that you're their friend. You want to take somebody in there and make them a hero. It sounds kind of silly, but in fact, that's what you're trying to do. Because in the early days of this, we used to say, making a decision about your communication system is like betting your life.
Mm.
If you're in there and you make the wrong decision, and somehow, some way, the guy in the top, uh, wooden office at the top of the building, if he can't get his dial tone, you're over.
Right.
Little things like that. You have to make sure he gets it. But you need to know what this guy wants because you have to listen to them. You have to talk to them. You've got to get them to open up and tell you what's going on. And as I said, most of the time, your prospect will tell you what you need to do to close the deal, to make something happen. The deal is something that is not one-sided. That's something that you and your prospect put together. You and your prospect should have a very, very warm relationship. Okay. And you shouldn't be afraid to tell your prospect in the right ways, hey, dude, you don't get this at all. You got to think about these things and that thing and so forth like
Right.
that. And you go it. I mean, there's different things that you need to realize. I had a situation with a gentleman who was managing basically a mortgage servicing company. And we were getting in there and, my people weren't making a lot of progress with this guy. And we should have, because what he needed was what we had.
Mm-hmm.
And we went through it and we weren't getting anywhere. So I went and had a meeting with him and his name was DeWalt. And I said to him, DeWalt, we've got a problem here. We've kind of stalled. And he, well, yeah. And he was what we call down here a ring knocker. He was a University of Florida guy with that big, gator ring
Right.
banging on the table, but he's a good man. I really like the guy genuinely. And we got to talking about it, and I said to him, I said, all right, well, I think I've isolated what the problem is. He said, what's that? I said, well, you recognize me and my people as salesmen, right? Yeah. I says, well, I can tell you, I've been in this long enough to tell you that a buyer does not trust salespeople. Ergo, so my people are coming over here doing the best job they can. And underneath it all, you can't help yourself, but you really don't trust them. But let me tell you something else. After all of the years I've been in sales, salespeople don't trust buyers. That's something that we need to know. So now that we got that nonsense on the table, let's brush it off and get down to making some sense for you. And what is it? What are the key items for you that make sense? You should know by then, from your experience in the industry, what this guy's problems are, what he really needs is, and from history in the past, where has he been? Is he favorable to your competition? Is he always buying cheap? Is he constantly making a lot of changes and so forth? And once you isolate that and understand where you're coming from, you're doing a better job than making sure you're taking him out for martinis every night to get him to like you. And that was it. And some of them, well, yeah, you meet some people that are really weird.
Right.
And then you meet some people that are way ahead of you, and waiting
Yeah.
for you to catch up. And those aren't a bad thing to talk about. But in essence, you want to keep it simple.
Yeah.
Keep it as simple as possible. Because the other thing I said, you listen, question. All right, keep it simple. And then the last thing is make it yours. That's probably the most difficult part of it, making it yours, because a lot of people really aren't sure what they are and doing that. But, I'm not going to sell you if you can't buy into the fact that I'm genuine, I'm bona fide. And if you can't buy into that by the way I present myself and so forth, I might as well get in the car and drive home. It's not going to happen. So you have to establish yourself as someone, as I said, is genuine and bona fide, someone who is reliable, and trustworthy and so forth. And you want to work with people that understand what you're doing. I give you an example: referrals. You hear people talk about referrals.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best way to continue keeping things in your pipeline. I can tell you this: my late wife was in the funeral industry, and what her attack was that she sold what's called a pre-need. Okay, pay for it now, die later.
Right.
And I would tell her people and everything else. I said the key to this is that this is the best gift you can give your family. All
Right.
right. So let's say that, your husband buys into this pre-need program. And what's really great about it for the wife is that when the husband finally goes on to his reward, she just makes one phone call.
Right.
That's it. It's all planned. It's all done. Okay, guys, come on over here. He's gone down for the dirt nap. When's the schedule and so forth like that. Well, Beth did very, very well at that. And she never had to go out and cold call.
Right.
And so she was always absolved for that because she always had all of these referrals. Where everybody else was struggling on the telephone, bothering people at dinner, saying, we have one thing in common, which is we're both going to die. So let's figure out a way to deal with it now. Beth's opinion was, well, we did so and so, and I buried your daughter, and da 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 da. And she's a very personable woman, my wife, very sensitive
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. And she never ever had to cold call. She always worked for people that she had done business. She called them her families,
Mm-hmm.
and she had done very well. And I'm kind of proud to tell you this, even though I'm still suffering through some grief. But she passed away in North Carolina. We brought her down here, and to Jacksonville was part of the deal with their company. No matter where you were, if you were doing business with them, if you died in Timbuktu, they'd fly you back here to Jacksonville.
Right.
It was a good thing. Well, they did that, and we were starting to talk about things for the funeral, and I wasn't really big about that. We had talked about it. Neither one of us wanted a funeral, but anyway, I got a call from the people at her funeral call. They call them gardens, not cemeteries.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we're going to have to get a bigger chapel. I said, what do you mean? Well, word's gotten around, and we're expecting probably somewhere between 200 to 400 of her previous
Wow.
customers to come to that, which
Amazing.
was really something. I was sorry I couldn't go because I had picked up a mild case of COVID.
Mm.
And once the cemetery found out about that, they wouldn't let me come to the funeral.
Right.
So that was it. But we had had a good life together. But that was the lesson. I always told her, I said, boy, I wish I had someone like you on my team.
Yeah.
She was infallible with what she had done.
And
And
obviously very well liked. And you
oh,
hear that a lot about sales.
yeah.
Are you really selling yourself? Is that part of what your job is?
You are not going to do business with someone for whatever reason you have the least bit of trust in.
Mm,
Okay. And that comes immediately from that reaction, from our meeting here right now, looking at somebody's eyes, and seeing what they're like. I've had classes over the years as to how to tell when someone's not being truthful, when someone's lying,
mhm,
looking at their body, yeah, okay, fine. That's all wonderful. But nothing beats getting down to having a legitimate, honest conversation with somebody.
mhm,
And you've got my competition. What is it that you like about them? Well, they were a lot cheaper. Okay. So what does that bring to the table for you? Well, it's easy to balance my budget. I said, yeah, but how does that affect your business? How does that affect your people, your employees? I mean, are they fighting with your communication system to make progress? Is it enhancement to what they're doing? How can you make that something that is not only attractive, but something that this prospect will be happy to tell other people about? You need to do business with these people because they're really good. You need to do business with Fabiano's people because he makes it fun. And that's what my distributors did. At any given time, I added it up, and it was kind of hard. At any time across 50 states, I was probably working with some 250, 300 salespeople and sales managers, and it was pretty neat. I was on the road probably 120, 150 nights a year, which was good. You know,
mm.
it's a good experience. You see that. So anyway, blah 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 blah.
Has the digital age changed things? Are there fewer salespeople out there and more direct sales?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up. I don't know whether my potential publisher has brought anything else about this, but this is the second book that I wrote,
Okay, great.
The
What book is
Endangered
that?
Salesperson's Path to Longevity. And I did my homework on that one. And the salesperson, he's an endangered species.
Mm,
Less and less and less and less. You don't need a salesperson to buy a car, to buy a
right,
home, to get financing. You can get anything you want off of the internet as long as
exactly.
you do that, as long as you trust them. So the guy that's the salesperson who's hauling around his bag of fuller brushes, we don't need him anymore. And the book that I wrote says, okay, you need a path, not a guide, because a guide assumes that you have to have someone showing you. A path is something that you create. And that's what I'm trying to get across in my two books is that this is you. This is where we get you being you. Okay. And you can't try and be somebody else. I mean, like Zig Ziglar is not going to be able to do me any more than I can do Zig Ziglar. And the thing that I've said about Zig, because I don't never met him, but I like what he has to say, is that, Zig Ziglar is reportedly the best salesperson in the world. Well, the reason that he is that Zig sold everybody on the fact that he is the best salesperson in the world. And I don't think that I've never met him, but I don't think he'd have a problem with that.
Right.
And he sort of disappeared off of that. But there's a lot of people out there that have all sorts of ways to sell things, you know, and do that. Years and years ago, the Harvard Lampoon magazine came out. I don't know whether you remember that or not, but it was a satirical magazine. And their original cover was a dog sitting down and his eyes were looking up over here. And there was a guy holding a gun to the dog's head. And the thing was, buy this magazine or we shoot this dog. It's a
Yep.
hard thing to ignore, but it's a way to do it. There's all sorts of experiences out there.
Yeah.
But it was overall, I was having a good time doing it. I
Mm.
relished the opportunity to have the responsibility for all of these people and make them make them become successful, you know. And it
Was it
would be my
always communication systems that you sold?
actually along the way, I was mostly into sales management, but I've sold anything from Volvos to Violets to what else? I don't know. Another thing that began with a V. And
Violins.
violins. Yeah. Oh, yes. No violins. But I did all of that kind of stuff. And Volvos were kind of interesting because they had a program going. You wanted to buy a Volvo, we'll fly you over to Volvo country and you can get it there in Europe and then bring it back and blah, blah, blah. Have a great trip.
Mm.
So they would do that. But you need to understand where your profit line is. I mean, it's no good if you're closing customers and you're leaving a lot of money on the table. That doesn't work. Your company's not going to be happy about it. But the successful sale is where both you and the prospect are very happy with what they've got, you know.
What's the
And
secret to being a successful closer? You hear that a lot.
it
Is it
is, yeah, being a closer is someone that has really been able to pull a whole lot of things together. Okay. You've got to be able to, in advance, be prepared to answer any questions or any issues that your customer may have. We would do things, we would have a preparation meeting before we would go out and see that, and we would sit there and we'd throw things around, just trying to figure out, well, what if you say this? What's he going to say to that? And if he says this, what are we going to say to that? And you've planned it. You have this time. Like I said, time is the only currency a salesperson has. So you want to make it work for you. And so you would do that. So when you got there, anything that the customer brought up, you probably already had figured out and you had an answer, but you didn't want to make it sound like it was pat. You
right?
didn't want to make it sound like it was coming out of a hymnal or something like that. It had to be legitimate for this guy. And then in other situations, depending upon the environment, in a smaller community, you'd want to have a reputation of being known, which wasn't that difficult to do. And it made a difference. It made a difference. The people that were involved in their community generally did a better job. People that were active in their church generally had a full pipeline, were doing pretty well. And
I would
you had to
guess
get
one.
up and realize it. Pardon me?
I was going to say, I would guess one of the keys to being a successful salesperson is to really know your product, where you can really inform and
Absolutely.
educate the prospect about what this can do, right?
Right, right. Well, see, that was the thing. It used to be in the early days of interconnect, in the late 70s and the early 80s. They used to talk about features. Okay, we can give you music on hold. We can give you something that'll keep track of everybody's phone calls. We can do this, we can do that, so forth and so on. And that's it. But the thing is, the difference between features is the application. Now,
Hmm.
how do we take what this system can do and apply it to your particular situation? You know, and a good example of that is when they finally came up with call centers, when you had software that could adjust the calls and so forth going on and doing that. That was one thing. The other thing, which quite frankly, personally, I'm not happy about, there's entirely too much recorded business going on when you call them on the phone. I
Hmm.
want to speak to somebody. I want to speak to a live person.
Right.
Okay. I want to speak to them about what I want to speak to them about. I don't care about some deal that you've coming out with in 40 days. No, answer my questions. There's been time in the past where I've talked to salespeople. I want to know things. And I find myself saying, you're not answering my question. Okay. Will it do such and such and so and so? And you get a long, no, 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 no.
Right.
What will it do? Okay.
Right.
And how well will it do that? You know, the
And
other
that
thing that
harkens
you
back to your keep it simple. If you have an
absolutely,
explanation,
absolutely, you
yeah,
know, Einstein did not become a well-known household name because what he did was kind of complicated. But you want to keep it as simple as possible. You want to make sure that they understand what you're saying. So you're going to ask them questions. Do you understand this? Do you see how this will help you? Could you tell me now, after what I've said to you, how you see this working for you? You ask legitimate questions. Gone are the days when you walk into a guy's office and sit there and look around and say, "That's a lovely picture of your family," or "That's a really big fish. Where did you get that? Cabo San
right,
Rico?" And stuff like that. Those are the old days. Now it's sort of like, okay, we don't have the time for that.
right.
We've come in here, we've done a little work on the phone before we got here. I understand something about it. I've done my homework about your business, okay, and so forth. And as far as I can tell in this community, your organization is probably top flight in terms of what's going on. And it doesn't hurt to praise them a little bit when it's legitimate. If you go over the hill on that, you might as well walk out the door. They're not going to buy it. They're not going to believe it.
Exactly. You got to keep it sincere as well. You got to keep it ethical,
Right.
as you said. We've been talking to John Doc Fabiano. He has written a fabulous book, no pun intended. It is called The Tao of Sales. And if you've been listening to our conversation, like I know you have, you can tell that he is encyclopedic in his knowledge when it comes to this field. It's becoming a more and more competitive field, as Doc acknowledges, as the digital age takes hold. So if you
Right.
want to stand out, look up John's two books. One is The Tao of Sales, and John, the other one is called?
Well, it's the endangered salesperson's path to longevity. Kind of a
Wonderful.
long title, but then again, I have a tendency to be a little wordy. But I put that again with the research I did on salespeople and so forth, and it is kind of interesting. Most salespeople do not work on referrals.
Right.
Okay, most salespeople do not have a closing ratio higher than maybe 1 out of 4. And when you see that, you kind of say, okay, now within the book, I put together a program that's suitable for an Excel plan. So if you're thinking about going into sales, think, all right,
Right.
what do I need every month? What's my overhead every month? My mortgage, my kids' college, this, that, and everything
Right.
else. So you add that up. Okay, this is what I need to have every month. Now I'm looking at going into sales. All right. What is my commission, per deal? All
Right.
right. And we look at that. This is how much I have to have. So it means that I have to close this many pieces of business. Now, where am I? Is that doable? That's
Right.
the other thing. You figure some numbers out, you pencil it out, you let Excel carry you through and see that, and you're in a position to make a healthy decision because of what you see. They're your numbers, and you're going to look at that and say, I can do this if I work 18 hours a day. Well, that's
Right.
not going to work,
Exactly.
but it
Exactly. John,
shows
you've
you
got
what you're
great
going to,
advice out there. These books are survival guides for
right.
people who are in the sales industry or thinking about entering the sales industry. John, Doc Fabiano, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Uh-huh. Happy to be here.
Great to
Happy to
have
be
you. And to the
here.
folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time. This time, until next time.